She thought she had found the love of her life. Fresh off their honeymoon, Sarah was still glowing with happiness, until she stumbled upon something that shattered her world. A hidden drawer, a stack of old photos, documents with names she didn't recognize. At first, she brushed it off as nothing, but as she dug deeper, the truth became impossible to ignore. Her husband Daniel wasn't the man she thought he was. He had secrets, dark ones, and she wasn't the first woman to uncover them. Days later, Sarah vanished. Friends grew worried when she stopped answering calls. Then the unthinkable happened. Her lifeless body was found miles away from home. As detectives pieced together her final moments, a terrifying pattern emerged. This wasn't just a tragic accident. Sarah had joined a chilling list of women who had all made the same mistake, falling in love with the wrong man. And she wouldn't be the last. Sarah's friends and family were devastated. She had always been full of life, kind-hearted and trusting. But now they were left with more questions than answers. How could this have happened, and why? As investigators dug into her life, they discovered something chilling. Sarah wasn't the first woman to die under suspicious circumstances after being with Daniel. A pattern began to form. Years ago, another woman, Lisa, had been found under eerily similar conditions. Before her death, she had also been in a relationship with Daniel. And just like Sarah, she had started asking too many questions. Her case had been ruled an accident, but now, detectives weren't so sure. The deeper they looked, the more unsettling details surfaced. Daniel's past was filled with gaps, inconsistencies, and people who had simply disappeared. Who really was the man Sarah had married? And just how far would he go to keep his secrets buried? As detectives pushed forward, they started piecing together the moments leading up to Sarah's death. Her best friend, Emily, remembered their last conversation. Sarah had sounded different, worried, even afraid. She mentioned finding something in Daniel's office, something that didn't make sense. But before Emily could press for details, Sarah brushed it off, saying she would explain everything soon. That conversation never happened. Meanwhile, Daniel played the role of the grieving husband perfectly. He sobbed during interviews, spoke of how much he loved Sarah, and insisted he had no idea why anyone would hurt her. But the police weren't convinced. His story had gaps, little inconsistencies that didn't add up. Where was he the night Sarah went missing? Why were there erased messages on her phone? And why did security footage show his car in an area he claimed he had never been? As more secrets unraveled, the case took a darker turn. Sarah had unknowingly uncovered something dangerous, something worth killing for. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. Sarah had been happy, excited about the future, until she started questioning things. Now she was gone, and Daniel's perfect act wasn't fooling everyone. Determined to find answers, Emily began retracing Sarah's last steps. She went through old messages, bank records, and even visited the coffee shop Sarah used to frequent. That's when she met Claire, another woman who had once been close to Daniel. Claire's face went pale when she heard Sarah's name. She had dated Daniel years ago, and just like Sarah, she had started noticing things that didn't add up. But before she could dig deeper, she had a near-fatal accident, one that never quite felt like an accident at all. Now, hearing what had happened to Sarah, Claire was terrified. Meanwhile, the police had finally gathered enough to bring Daniel in for questioning. But just as they closed in, he disappeared. His phone was off, his car abandoned. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but fear, unanswered questions, and the terrifying realization that he might strike again. As investigators scrambled to locate Daniel, a shocking discovery changed everything. A hidden storage unit, rented under a fake name, was found just outside the city. Inside, detectives uncovered boxes of personal belongings, jewelry, clothing, and even old letters. Some of the items belonged to Sarah, but even more disturbing, others belonged to women whose names the police didn't recognize. How many lives had Daniel truly entangled in his web of lies? Emily, still determined to get justice for Sarah, dug deeper into Daniel's past. That's when she found something chilling, an old news article about a woman named Rachel who had mysteriously vanished years ago. The details were eerily familiar. She had been in a relationship with a man who matched Daniel's description. Her disappearance was ruled a missing persons case, never solved. Could it be possible that Daniel had been doing this for years, moving from place to place, leaving behind a trail of women who had simply disappeared? Then, just when the police thought Daniel had vanished for good, a surveillance camera picked up a blurry image of him near an empty house on the outskirts of town. He wasn't running, he was watching, waiting, and whoever he was after next had no idea the danger closing in on them. The police raced to the abandoned house, their hearts pounding. If Daniel was there, they had to act fast, before someone else became his next victim. As they moved in, the place was eerily quiet. Dust covered the furniture, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Then, in a locked room, they found a chilling sight. Walls covered in photos, names, dates. It was like a twisted timeline of his victims. And at the center was Sarah, her wedding photo pinned beneath a headline about her death. Suddenly, a noise came from upstairs. The officers moved cautiously, guns drawn. As they reached the attic, they found him, Daniel, standing in the dim light, a calm smile on his face. "You're too late," he whispered. That's when they heard it, a phone ringing nearby. It was coming from a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, tied up but alive, was Claire. Daniel had been watching, always one step ahead. But this time, the police weren't going to let him slip away. As they took him into custody, Emily stood outside, shaking. Sarah had gotten too close to the truth, but now that truth was finally exposed. Still, one question lingered: how many more were out there, still waiting to be found? In the days that followed Daniel's arrest, the truth about his past finally came to light. He had been living under different identities for years, moving from city to city, targeting women who trusted him. Sarah had unknowingly uncovered his darkest secrets, and it had cost her everything. But because of her, the cycle was finally broken. Claire, still shaken, began her long road to healing. Emily, though heartbroken, found comfort in knowing that Sarah's story had helped bring justice, not just for her, but for the other women who had been forgotten. As more evidence surfaced, authorities worked to trace Daniel's steps, uncovering cases that had gone cold for years. Though justice had been served, there was no undoing the pain he had caused. But Sarah's voice hadn't been silenced. Her courage had exposed a predator, saving future victims from the same fate. And that, in the end, was her legacy.